There's a pattern in how empires collapse. Not random, not chaotic, predictable like clockwork, and the timeline is always the same. 50 to 60 years from peak dominance to complete loss of reserve currency status. 50 to 60 years from we rule the world to we're just another country. 50 to 60 years that follow the exact same sequence every single time. The British Empire peaked in 1918, won World War I, controlled a quarter of the world's landmass. The pound sterling was the global reserve currency. Britain was the dominant superpower. By 1976, 58 years later, Britain was begging the IMF for a bailout. The pound had lost 78% of its value. The empire was gone. Reserve currency status was gone. Global dominance was gone. 58 years, from peak to irrelevance. The United States peaked in 1971, closed the gold window, solidified dollar dominance. The dollar was completely dominant. America was unchallenged. 2025 is 54 years later, 4 years from the 58-year British pattern. And here's what nobody talks about. We're not just following the same general decline, we're following the exact same timeline, year by year, stage by stage. The same decisions, the same breaking points, the same mathematical inevitability. The British pattern lasted 58 years from peak to collapse, 1918 to 1976. The American pattern started in 1971. That means if history repeats, and it always does, the collapse point is 2029, 4 years away. Let me show you the pattern, not the theory, the actual timeline, the specific stages, how Britain collapsed over 58 years, and why America is following that exact schedule right now. Here's the pattern. Empire collapse after peak dominance follows a 6-stage timeline. 6 specific stages spanning 50 to 60 years from peak to complete loss of reserve status. Stage 1. Peak and overextension. Years 0 to 5. The empire is at maximum extent, but the costs already exceed the benefits. Nobody realizes it yet. Stage 2. The first crisis. Years 5 to 15. A major war or economic shock drains resources. Massive debt accumulation. The empire survives but is permanently weakened. Stage 3. Managed decline. Years 15 to 30. Desperate attempts to maintain status. Currency manipulation. Devaluations. Each solution makes it worse. Stage 4. Accelerating crisis. Years 30 to 45. Multiple currency crises, lost wars, domestic unrest. The decline becomes visible. Stage 5. Last gasp. Years 45 to 55. Final desperate measures. Capital controls. IMF bailouts. The pretense of power without the substance. Stage 6. New reality. Years 55 to 60. Reserve currency status gone. Empire dissolved. The world has moved on. 6 stages. 50 to 60 years. We've seen this pattern in Britain. We're watching it in America right now. The exact same timeline, the exact same sequence. Let me walk through Britain's 58-year collapse, stage by stage, so you can see the pattern clearly. 1918. Britain wins World War I. The British Empire reaches its maximum extent. 458 million people under British rule. 1/4 of the world's population, 1/4 of the world's land mass. The pound sterling is the global reserve currency. London is the financial capital of the world. This is peak Britain. This is stage 1. But the war cost everything. The national debt went from £710 million in 1914 to £7.5 billion in 1919. Over 10 times larger in 5 years. Britain borrowed $3.7 billion from the United States, from creditor to debtor in 4 years. The empire was overextended, but they didn't know it yet. Stage 1. Peak and overextension. Check. 1918 to 1923. 1923 to 1933. Stage 2. The first crisis. The Great Depression hit in 1929. British exports collapsed. Unemployment reached 22% by 1932. September 19, 1931. Britain abandoned the gold standard. The pound, backed by gold for over 200 years, suddenly became fiat currency. They called it temporary. It was permanent. The pound devalued from $4.86 to $3.40 overnight, 30% gone. World War II made it worse. 1939 to 1945, Britain spent everything, borrowed from America under Lend-Lease, liquidated overseas assets. By 1945, Britain owed the United States $3.7 billion, total external debt over $21 billion. The empire was bankrupt. Stage 2, the first crisis, check, 1923 to 1933. 1933 to 1948. Stage 3, managed decline. Britain tried desperately to maintain reserve currency status, tried to keep the pound convertible, tried to prove nothing had changed. 1947, they made the pound convertible again. Within 5 weeks, $1 billion in reserves evaporated trying to support it. They had to reimpose capital controls. July 1944, Bretton Woods Conference. 44 nations chose the dollar, not the pound, as the anchor currency. Britain fought this. They lost. America had 70% of the world's monetary gold. Britain had none. The mathematics were decisive. From 1948 onward, the dollar was the official global reserve currency. Britain's 300-year run was over. Stage 3, managed decline. Check, 1930, 3 to 1948, 1948 to 1963. Stage 4, accelerating crisis. September 1949, Britain devalued the pound again, from $4.03 to $2.80, 30% gone overnight. 29 other countries devalued with them in 72 hours. The entire sterling area collapsed together. Import prices in Britain exploded. Food up 30 to 40%. Life savings lost purchasing power. 1956, Suez Crisis. Britain tried to seize the Suez Canal. The United States threatened to crash the pound unless Britain withdrew. Britain withdrew, humiliated. The moment when everyone realized America gives the orders now. Through the 50s and 60s, constant balance of payments crises, reserves draining, emergency measures, borrowing from the IMF. The empire was dissolving. India gained independence in 1947. Through the 50s and 60s, Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria, Malaysia. The colonies were leaving because Britain couldn't afford to hold them. Stage 4, accelerating crisis. Check, 1948 to 1963. 1963 to 1973. Stage 5, last gasp. November 1967, Britain devalued again from $2.80 to $2.40, 14% gone. Third major devaluation in 36 years. From $2.40 in 1967 to $1.57 by 1976, a 35% loss in 9 years. Capital flight accelerated. Anyone wealthy moved money out of Britain. Brain drain. Skilled workers emigrated to America, Canada, Australia. The 1970s in Britain. 3-day work weeks, constant strikes. Inflation hitting 25% in 1975. Economic chaos. September 1976, Britain went to the IMF for a bailout, $2.3 billion. The former seat of global finance begging for rescue. Stage 5, last gasp. Check. 1963 to 1973. 1973 to 1976. Stage 6, new reality. By 1976, 58 years after peak, the transition was complete. The pound was no longer a reserve currency. The British Empire was gone. Britain was a regional power. Globally, irrelevant. The world had moved on. From 1918 to 1976, 58 years, peak to irrelevance. The pattern complete. Stage 6, new reality. Check. Let me break down the mechanism. Why does it take 50 to 60 years? Why is the timeline so consistent? The answer is generational memory and debt accumulation. An empire at peak has living memory of dominance, but the world has changed. The empire is overextended. The old generation doesn't see it. First, crisis hits. Years 5 to 15, they borrow massively. The debt never goes away. It compounds. The debt spiral begins. Second generation takes power. Years 15 to 30, they inherit the debt and the belief that the empire is eternal, so they keep spending. They manage the decline but don't reverse it. Third generation, years 30 to 50, the crises accelerate, the decline is visible, but they're trapped by decisions made decades ago. They print money, devalue the currency, buy time. By years 50 to 60, the mathematics finally win. The debt can't be serviced, the currency can't be supported, reality catches up. The pattern takes 50 to 60 years because that's how long you can hide from reality. That's how long generational momentum takes to dissipate. Let's map the United States onto this exact timeline. When did America peak? The strongest case is 1971. August 15th, 1971, Nixon closed the gold window. The dollar became pure fiat, backed by nothing but American power, and the world accepted it. That's dominance. Stage 1, peak and overextension, 1971 to 1976. 1971, U.S. abandons gold standard, peak monetary power. But the overextension is already happening. Vietnam War, defense spending, social programs expanding. The costs are growing beyond what the economy can sustain. 1973, oil embargo. First crisis showing vulnerability. 1975, Vietnam War ends. America withdraws. First major military defeat. Stage 1, check. 1971 to 1976. Stage 2, the first crisis, 1976 to 1980. 1979 to 1981, inflation crisis. CPI hit 14.8% in 1980. Volcker raised rates to 20%. Brutal recession followed. Unemployment hit 10.8%. The Rust Belt hollowed out. Manufacturing collapsed. 1987, Black Monday, October 19th, stock market crashed 22.6% in one day, largest single-day crash in history. Stage 2, check. 1976 to 1986. Stage 3, managed decline, 1986 to 2001. The 1990s looked good. Strong economy, tech boom, end of Cold War. But underneath, problems were building. Trade deficits became structural, from balanced trade in 1990 to $452 billion deficit by 2000. Manufacturing fled overseas, factories closed, the industrial base hollowed out. National debt went from $2.8 trillion in 1989 to $5.7 trillion by 2000, doubled in 11 years. Dollar reserves started declining from 71% in 1999 to 67% by 2001. Stage 3, check. 1986 to 2001. Stage 4, accelerating crisis, 2001 to 2016. September 11, 2001, America responded with 2 decades of war. Iraq cost $2 trillion. Afghanistan another $2 trillion. $4 trillion spent on wars that achieved nothing. 2008, financial crisis, housing bubble burst, unemployment hit 10%. The response, massive money printing. Fed balance sheet went from $800 billion to $4.5 trillion by 2014. China started diversifying reserves from over 70% dollars to 62% by 2016. Alternative systems started forming. China launched CIPS in 2015. BRICS formed the new development bank. Stage 4, check. 2001 to 2016. Stage 5, last gasp. 2016 to 2026. 2016 to 2020. Trade wars. America trying to force better trade terms through tariffs. Revealed weakness. 2020, COVID crisis. America printed $6 trillion in 2 years. M2 money supply went from $15.5 trillion to $21 trillion, 40% increase. Dollar reserves dropped from 61% to 58%, accelerating decline. 2022, Russia sanctions. U.S. froze $300 billion in Russian reserves, showed the world dollar reserves aren't safe. Accelerated de-dollarization. 2024, BRICS expansion, from 5 members to 44. Creating alternative payment systems, yuan-denominated oil trades, capital flight starting, wealthy Americans buying foreign real estate, gold, cryptocurrency. This is stage 5. Last gasp, America is still dominant militarily, but the cracks are everywhere. The decline is visible. Stage 5. Check. 2016 to 2026. Stage 6. New reality. 2026 to 2031. We're not there yet, but the pattern says it's coming. Based on Britain's timeline, here's what happens next. 2026 to 2029, the crisis moment. Something breaks. Treasury auction fails. BRICS currency launches. Dollar drops 20 to 30%. 2029, the break point. Year 58. Reserve currency status officially ends. Dollar drops from 58% of reserves to maybe 35%. By 2031, 60 years from 1971, the transition is complete. Dollar is no longer the dominant reserve currency. America is still a major economy, but not the hegemon. Just another country. The pattern complete. 58 years for Britain, 60 years for America. Same timeline, same stages, same outcome. Let's be systematic. Warning signs that America is following Britain's exact timeline. Warning sign 1. Correct point in the 58-year timeline? Check. Year 54. 4 years from the British collapse point of year 58. Warning sign 2. Alternative systems operational and growing? Check. SIPs, M-Bridge, BRICS payment systems processing trillions. Warning sign 3. Reserve percentage in accelerating decline? Check. From 61% to 58% in 5 years. Warning sign 4. Major military expenditure exceeding economic return? Check. 800 bases. 892 billion annual spending. Warning sign 5. Debt to GDP exceeding 100%? Check. 36 trillion in debt. 123% debt to GDP. Warning sign 6. Allies quietly diversifying reserves? Check. Germany, France, Japan all reduced dollar reserves since 2020. 6 out of 6 critical signs. Every warning sign present. Here's the timeline projection. Based on the British pattern, 2025 to 2026. Current situation continues. Slow decline. Increasing pressure. 2026 to 2027. Pressure builds. BRICS currency launches. Major oil producers shift to yuan. Something reveals the system is breaking. 2027 to 2029. Crisis accelerates. Dollar drops 20 to 30%. Import prices explode. Inflation spikes to 8 to 12%. 2029. The breakpoint. Year 58. Reserve currency status officially ends. Maybe IMF intervention. Maybe formal announcement of multi-currency system. 2029 to 2035. Transition period. Standard of living declines. Empire contracts. America becomes normal. The pattern predicts 2029 as the inflection point. 4 years from now. Year 58 of the American decline. Maybe you're thinking, this is too precise. You can't predict the year. But the pattern isn't a prediction, it's a framework. Empire collapses take 50 to 60 years. That's the generational timeline. Britain took 58 years from peak to collapse. America started the decline in 1971. 58 years later is 2029. Could it be 2027, 2032? Yes. But the decade is predictable. The late 2020s to early 2030s. And we're in the last gasp stage right now. Stage 5. This is when Britain was most desperate, when they tried everything, when nothing worked. America's doing the same things. Printing money, threatening sanctions, using military pressure. Exactly what Britain did. The pattern says the mathematics will be decisive for America too. You can't run trillion-dollar deficits forever, can't print money indefinitely, can't maintain an empire on a weakening currency. The math cares about debt, deficits, and dollar demand, and all three are moving in the wrong direction, have been for 54 years. Here's what I want you to understand. The 58-year timeline isn't random. It's the natural life cycle of reserve currency dominance after peak. How long generational momentum takes to dissipate, how long you can hide from structural problems. Britain proved the timeline. 1918 to 1976. 58 years. America is following the same timeline. 1971 to 2029. We're at year 54, 4 years from pattern completion. Stage 1, peak and overextension. Check. Stage 2, first crisis. Check. Stage 3, manage decline. Check. Stage 4, accelerating crisis. Check. Stage 5, last gasp. We're here now. Stage 6, new reality. Coming 2029 plus or minus 3 years. The exact same pattern, the exact same timeline, the exact same outcome. And the pattern never lies. Maybe the exact year is wrong. Maybe it's 2027. Maybe 2032. But the decade is clear. The sequence is clear. The outcome is clear. America's reserve currency status ends in the late 2020s to early 2030s through the same 58-year pattern that ended British dominance. The mathematics are identical. The sequence is identical. The timeline is identical. 58 years from peak to collapse. Britain proved it. America's living it. The pattern predicts it. If this changed how you see the timeline, if it gave you a framework to understand when the dollar's dominance ends, subscribe to this channel. Because when we hit year 58, when the late 2020s arrive, you'll want to understand why it's happening, how Britain's pattern predicted it, and what comes after the reserve currency era ends. History has the timeline. The pattern reveals it. And the pattern never lies.